Hi, and welcome to another edition of Probeline, our first Probeline, filmed at Steve's Guitars in Carbondale, where GrassRoots has made a concerted effort to set up a studio to bring music and now other shows to you. We'd like to give a lot of thanks to the Aspen Thrift Shop, which has supported Probeline for 15 years, but as you know, during COVID, the thrift shop is closed. So this year we're flying without sponsors, and we really hope that you will be in a position, if you like the program, to make a donation to GrassRootsTV.org to help us keep going with this nonpartisan, community informative programming. And today we're going to get to know Francie Jacober, who is a candidate for County Commissioner in District 5. Today's program is Get to Know a Francie. So with that, Francie, welcome to Probeline.
Thank you, Reid.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
So, you want to be a county commissioner.
I do.
How come?
Well, it never crossed my mind actually until my son Ty called me and said he'd been asked by several people to run, and he's doing other things. And so he said, well, what do you think about running? And I mean, within 10 seconds, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want to do. Not the running part,
right,
but the job part.
Right.
Because I had retired from teaching just last year, and I managed Fat Belly, but I needed something to really get my blood going.
Yeah. So
I was right away, I was like, oh yes, that's exactly
So that was an easy and quick decision.
It was really easy and quick.
Well, what made it easy and quick?
Well, I love politics, and I love to be involved with issues. And I, particularly am invested in environmental solutions to our issues. And there's just a lot of things going on in this valley to a lesser extent than the rest of the world, but nevertheless, pretty important issues that I follow all the time and would love to be a part of the solution for some of them.
Yeah, great. So you just retired from, how long were you teaching?
30-something, 35, 38, I don't know. 5 years at Country Day here in the Valley, in Aspen Country Day, and then 21 years at Carbondale Community School.
So that everybody knows, we know each other because of your role as a teacher. But I was surprised to hear you say you were only at Country Day for 5 years and then so many years at the community school, because that's where I know you from.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I taught before I came to this valley too. So.
Is that what brought you here, was teaching, or?
Well, we took sort of a hiatus from life in Colorado and went to St. Louis for a few years. My husband at the time, Jock Jacober, most of these watchers know Jock, took a job in St. Louis because we were ranching at the time, and ranching is a desperate operation for anybody.
You were ranching here?
We were in southern Colorado.
Okay.
We raised our kids on a ranch in southern Colorado. And so I didn't want to make the move in the first place, but once we got there, it didn't take long before I knew this is not going to be our home. And the very first summer I started Colorado Wilderness Experience so I could leave St. Louis in the summers. And so I right away started looking at other alternatives. And my son Rio, my oldest son, actually went to Country Day as a boarding student. They had a boarding program for a very short time for ski racers. Mm-hmm. So when I heard there was an opening at Country Day, I applied so that we could come back to Colorado.
Is Colorado where you're originally from?
No, I came here when I was 18 to go to college.
Oh, okay. Where was that?
CU.
Yeah. A familiar story for a lot of us.
Yeah.
And then, so how long were you ranching? I didn't know that you did
well, we
that.
had that ranch for 11 years. And it was primarily a sheep ranch. We had milk cows, and it was really hard to leave it.
Yeah. Well, that would be I guess that always has to be a lifestyle kind of choice. It's not going to be a big money maker, but.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. So. So teaching, that's primarily what you've done, and.
Well, I was a midwife when I was younger, and in Colorado, in southern Colorado, when I was ranching, and then realized that midwifery and ranching were not compatible. This was before cell phones, so like if I would go up to town to play softball or something, I would have to call the sheriff and tell him where I was going to be so he could send somebody to get me. And
Yeah.
so being on call before cell phones was complicated.
Yeah.
And just dropping everything and leaving my 4 kids and going off to a birth was pretty hard on my family, and we had a hired hand at the time, and it was just hard for everybody.
Right.
And then I started a really small school where my older kids went. So then from there, I just progressed into more teaching while we were ranching.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say my primary profession has been teaching.
Yeah. It's amazing to think about teaching for 30-some years and keeping energy levels up and being excited about it over that period of time.
Well, you don't have much choice when you teach middle school. If you don't keep your energy level up, you're doomed.
So it's just a survival instinct to be able to...
Well, it's just what's required
Yeah.
to teach middle school. Yeah, you have to have a lot of energy, and you have to have a love of kids in chaotic transition,
Right.
which I do.
Good. And what was the Colorado Wilderness Experience?
Well, that was a outdoor wilderness company
Or
that
is it
I
was or
started.
is?
Was.
Okay.
I started it through St. Louis Country Day, actually. I went to them, and a man there, Duncan, can't remember his last name, and I talked about how to make this work. And so we had mostly Country Day kids the first year, boys, mostly Country Day. I think that was before Country Day was co-ed in St. Louis. And we came out and did I think it was a full-on 25-day course. That year it might have been 21 because we weren't doing mountain biking yet.
Right.
So we did it out of St. Louis, and then once we moved back here, we did it out of Carbondale. And so it was 25 days for kids 13 and older, and it was kayaking, rafting first, and then kayaking, mountain biking, rock climbing, and mountaineering. And then we had a course, a 14-day course for 10 to 13-year-olds, which was rafting and hiking and rock climbing. Didn't have the biking.
Yeah. And you started that up from nothing.
From nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. That's got to be. I mean, a lot of people have never really started a business, and
Yeah, well, it was certainly not about making money. It wasn't a business to make money. It was a business to get myself and my kids back to Colorado. And Jock mostly stayed in St. Louis, but then when he moved out, he did some of the courses with me. And I hired sort of instructors to work with me until my kids got old enough to be the instructors. So it was really about being in the wilderness. And at that time, I was spending probably 50 days a summer in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, you pretty much got it beat.
But that's very different than being in a meeting room for a
Yes,
whole day. What's
and
that
I've
going to be
wondered
like?
about sitting in a meeting room.
Yeah.
Which is also very different than teaching, where you're on your feet all day and you're very active and engaged with people. I don't know what meetings will be like.
Yeah.
I liked faculty meetings when I was a teacher. I actually mostly enjoyed them. I liked the exchange of ideas, and so I'm hoping that will be the case as a commissioner. That I like all the sitting commissioners, and I do like talking about things that I care about a lot. So
Yeah.
I'll just have to get up and walk around a little bit, I think.
There you go. So have you ever held a public office before?
No.
This will be the first time, jumping right in.
No, my public service has been teaching.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So what kind of things are you passionate about?
Well, the environment first. That's been the case since, I don't know, 1970 or something. And, I'm really a conservationist at heart, and that drives some of my perceived solutions to a lot of our problems is more conservation, less consumption in general, as government entities, as individuals, and straight across the board. But I'm also really interested in our immigration issues and trying to find ways to integrate our Latinos more into the lives of everybody in the valley and making their lives less fearful and more productive and more open. You know, it's really hard to watch a whole group of population of people who are in semi-hiding all the time, but trying to be involved. And it's a painful situation that we've created, and so I feel strongly about that. And I won't obviously have a voice in solving the national problem, but I would love to find a way to provide more support in this valley for that population. So I care a lot about that. I also care a lot about land use issues and the kinds of houses and the sizes of houses that are built in this valley. Our family was involved in a sustainable building construction company, which made me pretty passionate about alternative building styles and sizes, and so that's a place I would really like to get involved.
Yeah.
You know, and obviously I care about other things. I care deeply about education. I would like to see educational opportunities more equitable throughout Pitkin County, throughout the entire valley, but I will only be involved with Pitkin County.
Right.
I mean, people who live up the Crystal have really different educational opportunities than people who live in the Aspen district. And likewise for teachers, there's a huge pay discrepancy between up and down valley. And so Pitkin has teachers in the Basalt area, in the Crystal River Valley, and up in Aspen, and it's just pretty inequitable. So
I mean, the pay even within the county, or isn't it one school?
Well,
it's two school districts.
Well,
I guess.
there's the people who live in Marble and all the way down the Crystal River Valley who go to Roaring Fork schools, and people in Basalt who go to the Basalt schools. And so many people in the valley are affected by people within Pitkin County are affected by the discrepancy in educational opportunities and pay scales. And it's not that much cheaper anymore to live in Carbondale, for instance, than it is in Aspen.
No.
It's somewhat cheaper, but
Right.
housing is a nightmare in Carbondale.
It does seem like those prices have, it's always been out of control, but it seems, particularly now, really out of control.
And there's no availability. I mean, I have employees at Fatbelly who can't find housing. That some of them have to go to Rifle to find housing. Yeah, it's way out of control right now. Carbondale's really popular right now, and that affects a lot of people.
Yeah, do you think that, I've always had this question about whether being a commissioner is really a full-time job.
Well, I met with Steve Child, whom I taught with quite a long time ago, 21 years ago, at the community school. So I've known Steve for a long time. We sat and talked just as I was getting interested in this. And I actually thought it was a volunteer job. I didn't know it was a paid job. I about fell off the couch when he told me what the pay was. But he told me you have to be there once a week for regular meetings and once every other week for work sessions. And he said, but you're going to be doing a lot of work. You need to consider it a full-time job. It is a full-time job. I mean, everybody sits on other committees, so they have those committee meetings, and then I guess the amount of reading is pretty incredible. Just the amount of reading I've done to answer the questions for the newspaper, for instance, is pretty phenomenal. So there is a lot of information to learn out there.
What's it been like to be a candidate? I mean, you have to get out and about, and
Well,
you have to do these things like talk to me and.
Yes, but that's better than trying to talk to a room full of strangers. But several of the commissioners told me it's much harder to run for commissioner than to do the job of commissioner. It's hard for me. I'm a private person, so becoming a public person has had its challenges. Dee Dee Brinkman in Aspen stepped in, and she's really been helping me a lot, and I really appreciate it. And she is not shy at all about getting out there and talking to strangers. And my sister and her husband, Cynthia and Theo, they go to the farmers markets and walk up to people with my brochures, and they're way more facile at that kind of interfacing than I am. But so it's been a challenge for me. I love the research I've been doing and the talking with people about issues one-on-one. And I'm getting better at talking to strangers, and but that's been a challenge.
Yeah. How much? What kind of research do you do?
Well,
Now I'm curious, like, from the point of when you decided to run to now, are you still enthusiastic, or have you learned things, or is it confusing?
well, I read the entire State of Colorado Democratic Platform, which is really interesting, actually. And I was really surprised by how progressive it is. And so that was very validating for me to read that. Like, wow, that's really what the state platform is? So that was my first sort of dive in. And then I've tried to read through most of the building codes. I've read the budget for Pitkin County. I've read the history of SVEPA, which I serve on the board of now, which is the Crystal Valley Environmental Protection Association. So I've read their website and their history. And the water districts I've read a lot about. I've been reading a lot of documents and sort of websites and histories and policies, as much as I can fit in.
It must be changing or at least refining your perspective on
Oh, I've
things.
learned so much. Yeah. First of all, the airport thing, for instance, was just the ASC proposal was just really pretty sexy proposal, and it was pretty exciting to read. But then Amory wrote his article, and I was like, oh, wow, look at that. That's a completely different perspective. And so that kind of flexibility has been required as I learn more and more. And, it's been really interesting.
Do people bring those up with you in conversation now? As a public person, can you still walk down the street?
Well, at our end of the valley, if people hear I'm running, they go immediately into the multi-purpose trail. I call it the bike trail, but I'm not supposed to. It's supposed to be a multi-purpose trail. And most people have been really pretty supportive of Redstone to the top of the pass. But from the BRB to Redstone, people have very strong opinions, and they have not been shy about telling me their opinions about that on both sides. But airport is another one that brings out really strong emotions, and so I've been getting emails from people about the airport, and I got quite a few positive responses after my piece in the paper yesterday about the airport. So I would say up valley, the most I've heard about is the airport, and down valley, it's the trail.
And what are the controversies in your mind to those? I mean, what do you
I
think?
can make this easy, are you? Well, the trail, I think one of the intentions of the trail is to connect communities, and having hiked to Crested Butte and biked back and been up and down the pass several times on my bike and over to Peone, I feel like we have connectivity between the communities without cars. But I also recognize that we have a big biking community, and we're trying to promote more biking tourism. So the proposal that I saw just seemed so huge and expensive, and I wondered what % of the population this is really going to serve. But I have to say, the beginning of the trail that goes from Carbondale to the BRB, they did a beautiful job with the construction. They didn't tear up that whole riparian area. People use it a lot, so I'd say that has been a big success. So, and I think it's fairly uncontroversial from Redstone up, so hopefully we won't have to look at the intermediary section for a little while. Until I do more research. I read about the mitigating factors they're talking about, and I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. And the airport, as I said in my piece yesterday, and I agree with Amory, it seems like this is a reasonable time to just pause and rethink until we have a commitment from airlines for the planes that will be less polluting, less noisy, and that need wider space. And then, I don't know, we'll see where it's going to go. I think a decision is going to be coming up before too long.
Yeah, it's so challenging when you get into the kind of nitty-gritty of these different issues. There's a lot.
Yeah, there is a lot
to parse out.
A lot of
in
detail.
there.
Mm-hmm. I'm really impressed by the people on the committee who spent those 15 months putting in the time on that. I mean, the detail of what they looked at and the depth of research they did, the experts that they talked to, and they're still open. I mean, I read Greg's essay yesterday, and he's totally open to exploring it more, and so it's still an open issue and still requires, I think, a lot of rethinking and more research.
Yeah. So, where are the kids?
Well,
and how many kids do you have?
I have 4 kids. I have 3 boys and my daughter. And my daughter lives in Avon, and she teaches at Yampa in Glenwood. So she has a pretty hefty commute, especially when the fire was closed the canyon and then they closed Independence. She had a couple of rough days driving back roads trying to get over here. Anyway, she's a teacher, and then Rio is living on the Front Range, but he owns my property with me on Stark Mesa. His family's moving back next June. He works for a company called Food Maven, which is a really cool food distribution company that has, the mission is to eliminate food waste. So 40% of the food in our country is wasted. And so their company is designed entirely to buy food that might otherwise go through the waste channel and find places to sell it and give it away, food kitchens, and it's a pretty cool company. So that's what he's doing. Ty is here. He lives at Avalanche Ranch with his wife, Molly. And he is managing the retirement community behind True Nature. That's been his job for a while. And Forrest works for Aspen Diggers, I think it's called. And he's their project manager and estimator. So they've recovered from the loss of Crystal River Meats, which was very hard. And they're doing really well, landed on their feet. And so I have 9 grandchildren. And
oh my.
And we're really lucky, all of them, except for the baby, of course, are actually in school, in live school. So that turned out to be really fortuitous.
You know, it always seems like your family has this real entrepreneurial spirit. Is that, do you identify with that? Or?
I would say so. And, I think that going forward, certainly Crystal River Meats was entrepreneurial and very visionary. And I think going forward, they're totally enmeshed in what they're doing now, but it's being back in construction is not the end of the road for them. I think they've got a lot of things, irons in the fire.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Does that come from you?
I don't know. Their dad is very entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of issues can we talk about with, what do you want to talk about with running for county commissioner? What do you want people to know about you?
Well, I guess I want people to know that I work really hard. That's probably what most people say about me, I think. I get a lot done. Like I said before, my main thing is conservationism. And although I do care about other things a lot and will work for other things, family first for me, because that's pretty obvious. A lot of people know my kids, and I hear about it everywhere I go. If they're not being coached by my kids, then their house was built by my kids, or where can they get Crystal River Meats? And so I have a lot of touch points with people throughout the valley through my kids. So family first, and
So how do you think when, conservation's come up a couple times, how do you think that will play out as a county commissioner?
well, we have a really progressive government in the city and the county, which work really hard to attain pretty aspirational environmental goals. They are really on the cutting edge of looking at how to reduce climate change and how to be responsible stewards of the planet. It's really impressive when you look at that. I mean, just looking at the building code, for instance, it's mind-blowing, the details that they've put into that and the thought. And I think there's pretty much of a commitment with all of the county commissioners that this is really important and we need to keep pushing on it. So, you know, there's things, for instance, like the Crystal River Wild and Scenic designation, or the efforts from other communities to divert water from our western slopes, things like that that would really be sort of last, diverting water from the western slope to me is like a last ditch effort, when really what they could be doing on the front range is conservation of water, instead of having millions of acres of lawns that just are pulling water from our meager supply. Finding ways to conserve it, sort of like Santa Fe has done, and they've been pretty strict about their water supply for a long time. And so I think that if we look at conservation first before we try to just add more water to a profligate system already, that would solve a lot of the problems. And they might think, oh, well, maybe we don't really need to be bringing water over there that's really important for agriculture and recreation and fish life and all the things that depend on the riparian areas. Instead of pulling it from there, maybe we could just stop using so much.
Yeah.
So that's one area. And of course, that's true of using our energy too. The use of electricity is so much more than it needs to be. And, you know, obviously I'm a proponent of alternative energy sources. And, I think that Pitkin County is going to have more and more that way as well.
It does seem like there's a lot of move toward building codes that include energy budgets, trying to make it so that, well, we're using energy as efficiently as possible and move that forward. That's a good thing.
You know, and then in personal lives, like for me, I prefer sweeping my rugs instead of vacuuming them, or washing my dishes instead of using the dishwasher. Anytime where I don't have to use electricity, I try not to. And of course, there are some trade-offs. If you're using more water by washing your dishes rather than the electricity for the dishwasher, that kind of thing. But I have to say that for pretty much my entire adult life, there's very little I do where I'm not thinking about the cost of what I'm doing, the environmental cost of what I'm doing. I think there are just so many ways that we can change the way we live. Right. That would solve a lot of the problems.
Well, Pitkin County is such the commissioners too, they have such a broad mandate and set of things to work on. The land use code, the clerk's office, funding the sheriff's department, taking care of Health and Human Services. Yeah. It really is
affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
Yeah, I'd love to see some serious attention put to childcare, especially associated with affordable housing. You know, I have this sort of dream that if we develop another affordable housing project, that along with that we could develop a childcare program where maybe we can help appropriate childcare providers get started with a grant or something, so that we know that we have qualified and well-paid caregivers for the childcare that we help set up. And I think we look a lot to the childcare, making childcare available to working parents, but we don't spend a lot of time looking at the childcare givers, who are notoriously underpaid. And it is a hard job. And I was looking at the economics of that and just thinking, well, how many kids do you have to have in your facility to make a reasonable living, to afford to be in the valley? And so I think it's hard for people to start up something like that. So that'd be a place where I think between all the nonprofits in the valley and Mountain Voices Project and the commissioners and the city of Aspen, that maybe startup grants is a way to make it work. But I think talking about affordable housing as a separate issue from childcare doesn't really make a lot of sense. So
it is all part of a package of how do you make the valley survivable, or
that's right,
a place where people can thrive.
Yeah, and I was talking with Auden Schindler one day, and he has this great expression whenever he talks about any particular issue at Skico or throughout the valley. It's like, well, everything is everything. So you build a house, and then you have to have the road service to the house, and then you have to have everything that goes with that. And I mean, everything has repercussions, and you can't really isolate issues.
Yeah, it can almost be paralyzing to think about how all this stuff is connected.
Yeah, really.
How do you work
Yeah,
through
so
it?
that one thing at a time.
Yeah. So, how do you work through it? How are you? When you solve problems, do you dissect them? How do you work that through, or verbally interact, or?
Well, I read a lot,
Yeah.
and I do like to verbally interact, and I really like to hear what other people have to say about issues or about possible solutions. And like, I was talking with my son last night about something that came up at Fat Belly, and he said something that was a way I hadn't even thought about looking at this particular problem. And it was just like so eye-opening. It's like, oh my God, I never looked at it that way. And so I really do like to hear what other people have to say. But I am someone who chooses a chunk of time and does something to completion in that chunk of time. I'm not somebody who can do this for a little while today and then come back to it tomorrow and do a little more. So I tend to work much more efficiently if I give myself a deadline and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. And that has worked for me, and I'm able to get a lot done doing it that way. Sometimes, because I need that chunk of time, I have to work up against an imposed deadline because I couldn't find the time before. But that seems to work for me, so that's kind of how I operate.
Put your head down and
Yeah.
get it done.
Yeah, focus, yeah.
Yeah. So you're not a multitasker of.
I
10
am throughout
projects
the
at a
day, but
time.
if I have a project to do, then I need to focus only on that.
Yeah.
That was the way it was for me with grading papers as a teacher too. I had to have, okay, I'm taking this period of time, I'm doing this whole stack of papers. I don't care what comes up unless the house is burning down or something. I'm getting through this now, I'm focusing on this.
Well, I admire that.
Well, it's just one way.
Yeah,
People make other ways work, but that's my way.
that sounds good. Yeah. So, we've covered some of the issues. We've talked about kind of how you do things, some of the things that are important to you. Let's talk a little bit about what you hope to be able to accomplish.
Oh, boy.
Have you been able to think about that?
Well, Reid, I don't know everything that needs to be accomplished yet. I'm really a newbie at this, and so I'm going to be looking to the other commissioners and the other entities in the valley that are involved with all the issues to sort of provide some direction. Like I say, I would like to accomplish something around childcare. And I'd like to be part of the environmental solutions, but there are so many experts with so many ideas that, I would have a voice, but not the expertise that they have.
Well, that's kind of
So-
part of it too, is gathering
Yeah,
all of that expertise and trying to synthesize it into some sort of solution.
yeah. And listening to other people, because, one person's solution could have blinders.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to see the whole horizon at one time. So I'm not sure exactly. I just would really like to lend a open ear to a lot of different constituents in the valley, and learn from people, the commissioners as well as other constituents, and find my way.
Well, it's a very complex job, as you well know.
It's really amazing how many people know about what county commissioners do. And it's shocking to me that we have huge counties in the state that have 3 commissioners. Like Jefferson County or Garfield County. That's not very many people at the helm of these huge counties. And I think people, I know this was true of myself, don't pay a whole lot of attention to the county commissioner race because they don't realize how many decisions the commissioners are a part of and what kind of effects that can have on their daily lives. So that's it's been interesting to see how many people are totally unaware of the commissioners
And what they do,
and what they do.
and what
Yeah.
they're responsible for.
Yeah,
And I personally think it's great that the Home Rule Charter made it so that there are 5
oh, me too.
county commissioners. It having worked for boards of both 3 and 5, the debate with 5 is much better.
Yeah, it's much broader. Yeah,
It gets more like what you're talking about, more voices into the conversation, more of bringing your experience as well as 4 other people
yeah,
into it to try and make a decision.
yeah.
But it does mean got to get along with a group.
Well, these guys are pretty easy to get along with.
Yeah. Do you know most of them? Or?
Well, I've spent time with all of them since I decided to run. I've gotten to know Greg. He's been really helpful to me. He's really great. And Patty and I have been spending time together recently. And then, like I say, I've known Steve for a long time. I've met with George a couple of times. And I know he's done a great job and got big shoes to fill.
Yeah. But that opens up that seat.
Yeah.
The 5th district is all down valley.
Well, it's also
Isn't it?
up the frying pan, like Thomasville is in the 5th district, strangely enough, and part of Basalt, and then the Crystal River Valley. It's a weird shaped sort of starfish kind of thing.
Yeah. It's very diverse too.
Yeah, it's very diverse.
It has a whole bunch of different communities in
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, even in the Crystal Valley, sort of the end town towards Carbondale has sort of a different makeup than the end up near Marble, you know. And, of course, that's an oversimplification, but definitely has different characteristics in the different parts of the district.
Have you had to get out and meet a lot of people and travel that district?
Well,
or
I haven't done
how do you
any
do
door to
that?
door, which of course is what I originally thought I would be doing, because first of all, the Democratic Party really discouraged it, and at first we couldn't, period. And now that we're a little
Is
bit
that
more open,
because of COVID?
yeah, because of
Okay.
COVID, and now that we're a little bit more open, the thought of walking up to somebody's door and knocking on it just isn't very inviting right now, because I could see, I mean, people are a little bit afraid of each other now, which is a really unfortunate consequence of COVID. But so I haven't done that. I've been to a couple of farmers markets. I've been to the SAVEPA meeting. I'm going to go to the Woody Creek Caucus at the end of the month, I hope, which is their first live caucus since COVID. So most of my work has been online, and there's been a lot of work, like getting the 100 petitions to get on the ballot with emails. And each email had to go to the person from me. So, for instance, nobody could forward emails to their friends. So that was really a challenge for all of us who had to do that. Greg
Yeah, it's
and
got to be
Steve.
very hard to run a campaign.
Yeah, it was really,
Right
that
now.
was really hard. That was many, many hundreds of emails and hours on the computer. And then the same with getting endorsements. You know, normally you would have conversations with people, and so it's been lots of one-on-one emails. And I actually didn't really picture my life going towards that much time on a computer. But people have been very warm and open and responsive, and that's been great.
That's wonderful. Well, I admire that you're doing this,
No, thank you.
because I think it's a very difficult job, and it takes a lot of time, and a lot of everything. It becomes controversial at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
Yeah, somebody said to me the other day, oh, Joey DeSalvo said, you know, everything you say now is going to be used one way or another, so,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed many years of anonymity
Yeah,
after being in a pretty public setting as the county manager, where it was very difficult to walk down the street
yeah.
and get from here to there.
Yeah, and as a teacher, you know, obviously the parents up and down the valley recognize me, but you're so busy when you're a teacher that, you know, you don't go out to lunch like business people do. You're at school all day, and usually several hours afterwards. And so between that and then trying to balance some kind of exercise in your life and your family, there's not a lot of time to be engaged in the community. So it's almost like coming out of the dark ages in a way. It's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole world out there outside of the classroom, you know, and outside of the school.
Yeah. Well, you're out now,
I'm out, out and about.
out in the sun.
Yeah,
You know.
walking down the street in the middle of the day, things that teachers just don't do.
That's right. A certain sense, and now you're signing up to go back into all-day meetings, but I guess
That's
it's
right.
only 1 or 2 days a week.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's amazing.
But there'll be a lot of interaction with the public, I think,
Well, yes.
in a different way. But, yeah.
Well, and these demands to go to caucus meetings, go P&Z site visits. all
Sit
kinds of-
sit on committees that meet, and, yeah, meetings.
Yeah, there are a lot of, you were talking about how people are unaware of it, but there are a lot of interconnections with other counties and county groups and larger districts that,
Well, and there's a
Pitkin
push
County.
now to be more involved with the other counties. And I really like that, going to other county meetings, other county commissioner meetings. But even if you just look at Pitkin County, there are so many organizations in Pitkin County that are working to do good, that just keeping up with all of those is really a task.
Yeah.
There are a lot of organizations. It's really impressive. A lot of people working to do good work.
I would think as a candidate, there'd be a desire to kind of get out and try and interact with those groups.
Well, now, there more, like Mountain Voices Project is having a accountability night Tuesday with the commissioners from Eagle, Garfield, and Pitkin. So we're going to have 13 commissioner candidates at that. It's a Zoom meeting, and I think they said they're expecting like over 300 attendees. And, so that kind of thing is sort of replacing the in-person meeting. But we're starting, I think, to get a few more in-person meetings, and honestly, I'd be much more inclined to attend more of those rather than Zoom meetings. They fill their purpose, but they're hard.
There is a strain to them.
Yeah.
You know, they're I call them Brady Bunch meetings.
A Brady Bunch,
Yeah,
really?
they have all those little
Oh, yeah,
windows.
right. Yeah.
And there's a certain advantage to it, and at the same time, it's a bit contrived, I think.
It is. But it does save a lot of resources.
Absolutely.
But there's just nothing like being with people.
Yeah, that's true. We have about 2 minutes left, so I want to make sure that I've asked you the things that you wanted to get out, or if you have anything you want to say that I may have missed.
I don't think I do. We covered a lot of topics, and I hope people are keeping up with what my opponent says and what I say, and same with Chris and Steve. And I just would like to see people in the county be involved, because that's what it takes.
Yeah. So it's get out and vote.
That too. Get out and vote, yes.
Well, great. It's certainly been nice to reconnect with you, and as the audience may or may not know, that we have a history because you taught my kids.
And they went to Colorado Wilderness Experience.
Yes, they did, both of them.
Yeah.
And they think very highly of you.
Oh, that's nice.
So, and they both turned out okay. So I want to thank you for helping them survive us as parents.
They were pretty far along that road when I got with them.
Well, thank you, Francie.
Thank you, Reid.
It's been a pleasure. So this concludes another episode of Probeline. Please, if you appreciate this programming and are in a position to do so, we would like to have donations to help support us. This is not the year that our friends at the thrift shop can help us out because they're closed. So thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your day.